Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities.
The crowns, the gold, the glittering carriages, none of it matters anymore, because behind those palace walls, a silent betrayal has just rewritten the future of the monarchy. And the most shocking part, it didn't come from an enemy, it came from inside the king's own marriage. This isn't just palace drama. This is a power shift so quiet, so calculated that the public wasn't even meant to notice. But something happened in the dead of night, something so explosive that by sunrise, King Charles was still the king in name, but no longer the man truly in control. Because at exactly 3 a.m. on March 7th, 2026, in a room the world will never see, King Charles signed something that insiders are now calling a silent coronation. No cameras, no announcements, no ceremony, just a signature and a complete transfer of real authority into the hands of Prince William. And here's where it gets darker. This wasn't planned months in advance. This wasn't a slow transition. This was triggered, forced by something urgent, something dangerous, something that couldn't wait another day. A betrayal. Not from a politician, not from a scandal-hungry journalist, not from some outside threat, from Queen Camilla, the woman who was supposed to be his closest ally, the woman who was supposed to protect him. Instead, she became the reason he handed his power away. Inside sources revealed that just hours before those documents were signed, Prince William walked into his father's private study at 2:15 in the morning. No warning, no small talk, just a leather-bound folder clutched in his hands. And what was inside that folder? Evidence. Not rumors, not suspicions. Evidence strong enough to break a king. Charles, already weakened from years of illness, sat there exhausted, vulnerable, and completely unprepared for what he was about to see. Witnesses say he barely needed a minute, less than 60 seconds of reading, and everything changed. Then came the moment that insiders can't stop talking about. Charles pushed the papers away, looked at his son, and whispered just 10 words. Then the burden is yours, William. Do what must be done. That was it. No debate, no hesitation, just surrender. And in that instant, power inside the monarchy didn't shift, it snapped. Because what William was handed wasn't symbolic authority. It wasn't ceremonial influence. It was control, final say. Veto power over security, over finances, over personnel, over everything that actually determines whether the monarchy survives or collapses under the weight of its own scandals. And one person, more than anyone else, was cut out of that power instantly. Camilla. But why? What could possibly push a king to sideline his own wife overnight? To understand that, you have to look inside that folder, because this story isn't simple betrayal. It's something much messier, something tangled in loyalty, secrets, and dangerous connections that reach back years. It begins with a name the palace has been desperate to distance itself from, Jeffrey Epstein, and more specifically, the web of people connected to him. Among the documents William uncovered were emails, old, buried, but explosive, linking Sarah Ferguson directly to Epstein in 2009, and not casually, not distantly, financially. In those messages, she was asking him for money. Now to the public, that might sound like embarrassment, a bad decision, a moment of desperation. But to William, it was something far more dangerous, because in his eyes, anyone who ever depended on Epstein financially wasn't just compromised, they were vulnerable, permanently, a potential entry point for blackmail, a ticking time bomb inside the royal circle. And William doesn't do manageable risk. He eliminates it. He took this to Charles back in January, laid it out clearly, no soft language, no emotional framing. This isn't a family issue, he said. This is a security threat, and he gave the king a choice: cut ties completely or accept that the monarchy could be dragged into something far worse. Charles hesitated, and that hesitation opened the door for everything that followed, because standing directly in the path of William's plan was Camilla. Her loyalty wasn't to strategy, it wasn't to optics, it wasn't even to institutional survival, it was personal. Her friendship with Sarah Ferguson goes back decades, long before crowns, before titles, before any of this mattered. To her, cutting Ferguson off wasn't necessary. It was betrayal. She reportedly told Charles exactly that William was treating people like disposable assets, that loyalty should matter more than public perception. But William wasn't interested in emotional arguments. He responded with something far colder: surveillance. According to insiders, his team tracked multiple secret meetings between Camilla and Ferguson off the official schedule, away from palace oversight, deliberately hidden. This wasn't accidental. This was defiance. And when William confronted her, She didn't deny it. She stood her ground. She made it clear she wouldn't abandon her friend just to protect the monarchy's image. That was the moment everything snapped. Because for William, this wasn't about friendship anymore. It was about control. And if Camilla refused to align with what he believed was necessary for survival, then she became part of the problem. So he made his move. He gathered the evidence. He waited for the perfect moment. And at 2:15 a.m., when his father was at his weakest physically, emotionally, mentally, he placed that folder on the desk, not as a discussion, as a decision. And Charles chose, not his wife, his son. And just hours later, the monarchy changed forever. But what happened next? That's where things get even more explosive. Because Camilla didn't stay silent, she fought back. And by the time the sun came up, the palace wasn't just divided, it was at war. Camilla didn't wake up quietly that morning. She woke up dethroned in everything but name. And the fury that followed, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't contained. It was calculated. Because the moment she realized what had been done behind her back, that her husband had signed away real authority, that William now held the power she once influenced, she didn't retreat, she retaliated. And she didn't do it privately. She went straight for the one target she knew would shake everything: Catherine. Within hours, carefully placed leaks began surfacing, quiet at first, then louder, painting a very specific, very dangerous narrative. That Catherine wasn't the composed, supportive royal the public believed, but something else entirely: an architect, a strategist. A woman quietly orchestrating a transfer of power while the king was still alive. The suggestion was chilling, that Catherine had used Charles's illness, his vulnerability, to accelerate William's rise and her own. It was the kind of accusation designed to hit exactly where it hurts most: public trust. And for a moment, it worked, because people don't just watch the monarchy, they feel it. And the idea of a future queen moving too fast, pushing too hard, it planted doubt. But Camilla underestimated something. She thought she was starting a media battle. What she walked into instead was a trap already set, because by 11:15 that same morning, everything collided inside one room at Clarence's house, a tea room. 2 women, no cameras, no escape. The air inside that room was intense, it was suffocating. Years of polite smiles, carefully managed appearances, and controlled distance, all gone. What sat across that table now wasn't family, it was opposition. Camilla didn't hold back. Witnesses say her voice carried sharp, cutting words, accusations wrapped in anger and something deeper: fear. She looked directly at Catherine and delivered a line that insiders say froze the room instantly: "Don't think for a second that your savior act is fooling anyone. You're reaching for the crown before the seat is even warm." That wasn't just confrontation, that was exposure. Or at least that's what Camilla believed. Because Catherine, she didn't react. No anger, no denial, no defense, just stillness. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from shock, but from certainty. Because she already knew what was coming next. 30 seconds later, the door opened, and Prince William walked in. Not rushed, not emotional, calm, cold, holding the same black leather folder. He didn't sit down immediately. He didn't speak right away. He simply placed the folder on the table between them and opened it. Inside, photographs. Clear, undeniable, time-stamped. Camilla entering a private residence under the cover of darkness. And the person waiting inside? Sarah Ferguson. This wasn't rumor anymore. This wasn't interpretation. This was proof, captured, documented, undeniable, that while the palace publicly claimed to be cutting ties with the entire Andrew Link network, the queen consort herself was secretly maintaining contact. The silence that followed was heavy, because in that moment, the narrative flipped completely. William finally spoke, and those in the room say his tone wasn't angry. That's what made it worse. It was controlled, measured, final. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He gave her a choice: step back permanently from decision-making, accept a consultative role, fade into the background, or watch everything in that folder, every image, every connection, every hidden meeting become public by morning. No middle ground, no negotiation, just a line drawn so sharply there was no way to pretend it wasn't there. And Camilla, for the first time in this entire war, had no move left, because this wasn't about loyalty anymore. It wasn't about friendship. It was about survival. And William had just made it clear his version of survival didn't include her at the center. But here's where the story takes a turn most people didn't see coming. Because while Camilla was fighting emotionally and William was executing strategically, there was someone else behind all of this. Quiet, precise, and far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Catherine, the woman the world thought was simply graceful, had been building something something in the shadows. For weeks, while the palace was distracted by scandal, by leaks, by internal tension, Catherine was working with legal teams, financial advisors, constitutional experts, constructing something airtight, a system, a framework that would allow this transfer of power to happen without challenge, without loopholes, without the risk of being undone. This wasn't reaction. This was preparation. Every step William took had already been mapped, every vulnerability already closed. And the most chilling part, she wasn't doing it for power, she was doing it for the future, specifically for Prince George. Because in her mind, this wasn't about today's scandal. This was about what kind of monarchy her son would inherit. And she made that brutally clear in one meeting that insiders still can't believe happened. During a private briefing about finances tied to the Andrew situation, Catherine reportedly shut down any suggestion of using royal funds to contain the damage. Her words? Sharp, direct, unapologetic. We are not here to save a man, we are here to save the crown. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Because this wasn't the soft, smiling royal figure the public adored. This was someone thinking decades ahead, calculating, protecting, cutting away anything and anyone that threatened the institution, even if that meant family. And that's the real divide that exploded on March 7th. Camilla represents loyalty, history, human connection, the belief that relationships matter even when they're inconvenient. Catherine represents the future, strategy, a monarchy stripped of emotion, rebuilt on control, precision, and survival at any cost. And in that clash, there was only ever going to be one winner. By evening, it was over. Camilla canceled her appearances, retreated from public view, her access restricted, her influence gone. The title remained, but the power completely stripped. And yet, this isn't the end. Because while William now holds the authority, while Catherine has built the system, while the monarchy appears stronger, cleaner, more controlled than ever, there's one problem they haven't eliminated: Sarah Ferguson. Because insiders are now whispering something even more explosive, that she may still be holding documents, financial records, connections that go deeper than anyone has publicly acknowledged. And if she decides to release them, this entire carefully constructed system could shatter. Because William has built a monarchy on transparency, and transparency cuts both ways. The question now isn't whether he can lead, it's whether he can control what comes next. Because once the truth starts coming out, no one gets to decide where it stops. And that's the real story the palace doesn't want you to see. This wasn't just a power shift, it was a gamble, a calculated, ruthless, all-or-nothing gamble on the future of the monarchy. And whether it saves the crown or destroys it completely is something the world is about to find out.